Give me this answer simply. Are you happy with these appropriations? Because we like our senators to be happy if at all possible.
No, I'm unhappy. I'm on the Budget Committee, and it's probably the most important committee here that has the least amount of relevance, because budgets went out the door about 20 years ago that we actually did, appropriated to, and lived with. So there are so many escape clauses. That's what's fueling these trillion-dollar deficits. A lot of that's mandatory spending. That's a trick here. You change it from discretionary to mandatory. And I'm one of the few that votes if there's not any reform, if you don't see anything actually changing. We're putting a big load on our kids and grandkids. So this is a pleasure for me to vote against this stuff today.
So Senator, if you could take a blue pencil and go through this, where would you cut?
So that's the big deal here. We as Republicans and conservatives, for me, defense is the most important thing we do. Obama did emaciate it back in his stretch. That got pretty well put back to where it needed to be in, I think it was March or April of 2018. And I told my fellow conservatives yesterday at lunch that if we aren't willing to constrain, find efficiencies in defense, how are we going to get them to spend less on domestic spending? So that's one issue. Plus, the other side holds the threat of a budget or a government shutdown, and we need to get a bill across that does not shut down the government, so the appropriators and the spenders can't use that as leverage to make you vote yes on these bills. I'm going to be speaking out about that, and it's a pleasure because I'm backed up big time in a place like Indiana where we operate in the black, have rainy day funds, things work, we make the hard decisions.
So we're talking with Senator Braun of Indiana, as he just said. So Senator, go back to the defense just for a moment, because if you talk to some senior military people and retired senior military people, they often say, look, we could spend this money better. We need to increase certain spending without a doubt, but there are some things, particularly some big complex weapon systems, that really we don't need as much. If we listen to the military, would we be able to effectuate those efficiencies you talk about?
If we listen to any stakeholder in this government, you're going to get some version that we've got to do it. All I'm saying, thank goodness we're the only reserve currency, so we're able to pay for all this largesse by borrowing $1 trillion a year, throwing it on our kids and grandkids. Those chickens will come home to roost when we completely deplete the Medicare trust fund here in 6 years. Or if some other countries start to become places where people want to park their capital. And then we'll be dealing with it by crisis. I'm saying here, it needs to be across the board. Politically, we can't ask them to cut domestic if we're not willing to constrain defense. And we're spending too much everywhere, and you need the political will to talk about it.
Senator, let's turn now to another issue on your agenda today. As I say, you got a busy day up there on the Hill, and that's the USMCA, that successor to NAFTA. Yes. Your colleague, Senator Pat Toomey, has come out. He has an op-ed actually out today. Yep. He has spoken out and said, look, he's not all for this because he thinks this is perhaps the only trade agreement that actually will curtail trade in various respects. It's the rules of origin on the automobiles. It's the labor provisions, a lot of provisions. Does he have a point?
Hey, I've come to respect Pat Toomey. He's one of the smartest guys here. We're both fiscal conservatives. And I've also learned that there's nothing pleasing in any of these bills in its totality. So he is focused on some areas that I have heartburn with as well. But this helps farmers out especially, and that's the most struggling part of our economy. It helps manufacturers out. You create a lot of jobs with it. It's a win-win. The things he is talking about, I don't like either, but this is President Trump's signature package along with what they did back in December of 2017 with taxes and jobs. It needed to get across the finish line. Pelosi was playing footsie with it. Only agreed on her end because of the political consequences they're realizing with the impeachment saga. So we just disagree on this point. I agree with him on the particularities, not the totality.
Senator Mike Braun of Indiana we're talking with right now. So, Senator, you mentioned the impeachment situation. I'll ask one question about that, which is, you're a juror, so I'm not going to ask you how you're going to vote, because I don't think that's particularly good. But I think we all can agree we probably don't want to come out of this process, however it ends up, sending a signal to future presidents that we approve of calling up foreign leaders and asking them to interfere in our elections. How do we come out of this so we send the right message to the next president?
Well, all along, I don't think anybody liked that generally, but was it impeachable? I think that's the issue we're seeing now. If you look at the political tea leaves, you know, the American public wants to get this behind us, and they don't think the House has made the case. But that shouldn't in any way say that you condone what you were talking about there. So it's like anything here. I think that it's occupied way too much airspace. It's been calculated before they even had a reason in terms of why they wanted to impeach our president. To me, that tainted its origins. So I look at what I came here for, and it is to get a budget done, to maybe weigh in on infrastructure, to lower the cost of health care. And I know I'm solid there with my constituents, Hoosiers, and I think that reflects what the American public wants in general anyway. So
I always like to ask lawmakers about their constituents, and you took us there, the Hoosiers. What do they really care about in Indiana right now? And whether they're Republicans or Democrats, what do you hear from them that they really want out of Washington, and maybe the reverse, don't want out of Washington?
When I ran, it was clearly the cost of health care, border security, and Hoosiers, because we're fiscally responsible, worried about will Medicare, will Social Security be there for future generations. And we need to get back on point there. The budget is an example of where Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid drive all our deficits. Record revenues, because we're at the sweet spot of generating revenues to where you have a vibrant economy and you don't tank the economy with high taxes. We spend too much. Most of it is in the mandatory spending. It's an unpopular topic, but I didn't come here to avoid unpopular topics. We need to do it for future generations.